Good evening and welcome to the Darkside. I am one of your hosts, Tabitha Purple, and this is Mr. Storm.
What's up?
So, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm always great.
Good. I'm wearing Minnie Mouse ears to cheer myself up. Last week was a racially charged. I have just been through the racism, sexism, misogyny, full out week of craziness and decided that we needed to perk myself up to unpack some of the other issues in the news this week. So hence my Minnie Mouse ears have joined. Nothing. Okay, well, welcome to the Dark Side. Today we will be covering a number of news stories that we haven't done over the last few weeks. So if you want to participate, please do put your comments in the comment section. We will try and get to each comment as we see them. To that end, I will change the settings on Facebook so that I can see your comments. That's always helpful, isn't it? And we will dive right in. Okay, so opening up today, just want to say that yesterday, oh dear, need to do this. Yesterday was the 30th anniversary of the murder of Stephen Lawrence. This is a huge case in the UK. We've covered it here a number of times. I think we've covered it here every year on the Dark Side. And we just want to I guess take a moment to refresh ourselves. It's been one of those weeks and one of those years where race has obviously played a huge part in the dialogue in the UK, particularly on the back of the reports that we've been looking at. And the big report, of course, from Casey that came out, which was off this case particularly. Watching the news stories, it's still shocking to think that some of his murderers are still walking around free. Case has been closed by Scotland Yard, and to that end, Neville Lawrence, who we don't hear as much of, but if you've watched the documentary about this, you will hear his voice more, thinks that actually things are in a worse place than they were then, because they have completely turned their back and given up on promises. The 30th anniversary has just brought up some deep issues, and so while Stephen's mother, Doreen Lawrence, is still working tirelessly on this, Neville Lawrence, his father, feels that the police has betrayed the trust of Black British people, particularly in the capital, and that this is just an ongoing problem. And so although there were two men were jailed in 2012, it's believed that more were involved and have never been caught, investigated, or anything. And so today, even though the anniversary was yesterday, we want to just honor the family who have fought tirelessly for justice, not only for Stephen, but for so many other Black boys and girls across the country, trying to bring about changes. In Stephen's honor, they set up a fund in which, because Stephen's wish was to be an architect, they've funded programs in Hackney and other places where they've built schools and financed after school programs and all sorts of things. And so the work continues. And when you see the toll it takes, I'm reminded of the coroner's autopsy on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which said, despite him being assassinated at such a young age, his heart was that of a 60-year-old. The pain and the suffering that you go through when you do the work of justice, it is not easy. And in your daily life, you are reminded constantly that there is a lack of care, that people have a level of animosity towards you because you're engaging in this work, and completely want to ignore you. So I think it's really important that, there is a piece by Neville Lawrence in The Guardian that you can read to mark the 30th anniversary. There were lots of things refreshing, looking at what was happening. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this does. To mark the 30th anniversary, The Guardian has commissioned a fresh piece of research And the research is looking at the official figures again, looking at the experiences of ethnic minorities and the excessive use of force that is put on them. And it's just shocking that no matter how many times we say it, it will be downplayed, minimized, ignored, gaslit, whichever word you want to do. The construction is just awful. You know, and we've spoken here on the impact that Stephen Lawrence's case had on us as individuals, how life-changing it was for us to interact with, you know, a case that it hit close to home. It was in our home city, it was close by. You know, via, you know, people who are, you know, are related, you know, people who were mourning the loss of this young man. It just really shaped a generation of people who had been born into an unjust and unfair system. And for those of us who are involved in anti-racism work or involved in justice work, a lot of us from London particularly can trace our involvement beginning and awakening back then. So it's something to be paused and to remember the life of a young man that was snubbed out and that justice has not really been served, and by the look of the Casey report, may never be served. So yeah, I want to bring Mr. Storm back in on this. I don't know if there's anything you would like to add. Our thoughts and prayers are with the family as they continue to fight on. It's a tough one.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm more of an East Coast hip hop fan, but I think the West Coast and NWA were very eloquent when they said to, the police.
Okay.
So.
Okay. All right, so that's our first story of the night, just honouring the memory of Stephen Lawrence. Since it is the 30th year anniversary, I think it's important to pause and to honour his memory and to know that, you know, even in what was a horrendous situation for his family, no one can ever really know the toll that this has taken. It has inspired a generation to fight for justice, to stand up against the evils of the world. And so, you know, yeah, it's a difficult one. Is there a story that you would like to bring out next?
No, you can go on with the story.
Okay, well, there was an article that appeared in The Guardian and also, I believe, in The Observer, but I have the Guardian copy. Its title was "Racism in Britain is not a black and white issue. It's far more complicated." It's by Tomiwa Owolade. Sorry if I've said that incorrectly. And it's basically a report on ethnic inequality, and it reveals that Irish, Jewish, and traveller people are among the most abused in the UK. Off the back of that will come the next story, but I did want to look at this report because the way that the person opens up their argument is emotive, to say the least. And so the emotive issue is that they say something was amiss, but I couldn't say why. I was a sixth form student and talking to a girl who had told me with utter confidence that white people can't be the victims of racism. Racism is about power and privilege. White people have both power and privilege. Black people and Asians don't. This means that only the latter groups can be victims of racism. Racism in the exercise of power and privilege against people of color. I nodded at the time. She almost convinced me. Almost. I admired her clarity, but felt her account was too neat. I liked her passion, but thought it was painfully misguided. It has only been over the past few years that I have been able to say exactly what was wrong, why her account of racism is provincial rather than progressive, and why combating material inequalities should be based on truth rather than distorted narratives. And so I guess the person is putting forward an argument that this definition of racism is limited, and that there are inequalities all around. But what they actually begin to do is unpack what is it like to live in the UK as a minority. And when we talk about ethnic minorities, that can be from any ethnicity across the board, including Gypsies, Roma, traveller people, Irish, Polish, etc., etc. And this has been a point of contention in the UK, where we get the term, BME, BAME, Black and minority ethnic groups, and it is where we put together this, and that has caused quite, and I think we have an episode of this, so please go back and have a look, where the UK has had this notorious history, of course, of colonization, racism, etc., race being a social construct. We know it to be a social construct for the sole purposes of abusing those in what they would consider the lowest realms. And so they literally construct, alongside other European countries, this idea that Africans deserve to be enslaved, to work like animals until they die or are killed by the white people who deserve to be in charge. And this is the system of oppression. And so you have this beginning way back when, and this racial construction between those groups continues to this day. And we've had this discussion over and over about, you know, when we're talking about racism, how does this look? What does it look like when we're talking particularly about anti-racism projects? And we often use the very same power, privilege, you know, power plus prejudice equals racism. When we look at the definition of racism, when we look at structural inequalities, when we look at systemic inequalities, when we look at things that affect people beyond the moment of just somebody's ignorance or ill comment, things that have structurally affected communities of color across the globe, you can't help but notice trends and patterns. And what this person is saying is basically, well, it's a bit more complicated. And in some regards, absolutely. But what are we talking about when we say it's a bit more complicated? So I think it's worth noting that I probably disagree with this article. That's probably true. But that doesn't mean that I disagree that those groups have faced ethnically charged prejudice, and that it has negatively affected them, and that it has been, in some cases, completely detrimental to their well-being. But what are we talking about? And when we talk about the inclusion of whiteness, again, you have to look back and say, what is the definition of whiteness and who has the power? So this study that's been carried out, and there's a book, so I will be trying to get hold of this book. It's called Racism and Ethnic Inequality in a Time of Crisis. This is the book that is based on a survey of 14,000 people for Equality National Survey, and it was done between February and October. They came from 21 ethnic backgrounds and all parts of the country. And so what it's claiming that it is the most comprehensive account of racial inequality in Britain for about 25 years. So when they talk about how they interact with the evidence and with the information, here's where I think there is a minimization and an ignoring of historical, cultural and differences. So for example, we know that model minority is a problem. You know, the descendants of slaves, Black people across the globe, are pitted against others as the other people are the model minorities. And so they get a certain amount of, well, we're a little bit higher than you, and so you can stay on the bottom because we're just going to step over. So you know all of these issues exist. You know that every study that's done actually reports that Black people underreport any kinds of racism that affects them. Why? Because they are gaslit, they're ignored, they have a history of being marginalized. If they say anything, they're described as lazy, they're described as whining. You know, you get all of this that we know happens. And so Black people notoriously downplay any incidents of racism. It's a problem across the globe. This is not unique to the UK. And would often say, have you ever experienced racism? And would often draw for, well, have I been called the N-word? No. But have you experienced being passed over for a job? Have you experienced violence or pushing or shoving because of the color of your skin? Have you experienced somebody treating you less than human because they've taken that position? And the answer is often, well, yes, but you have to ask the right combination of questions in order to get that answer, because notoriously people of color don't want to have these really difficult conversations. And so when we look at these results, we have to take it within that. You can also talk about studies that have been done into the Chinese community and how racism has manifested itself within that community, and how they often have taken a vote of silence and don't deal with racism because of cultural norms and values in the same way that others do. And so therefore, when it comes to them reporting racist incidents, don't, or would say they don't face it. That's somebody else's problem, because they fall into a category of what is called the model minority. They work hard, they come here, they do this, this, and this, and tick, they're at least behaving themselves. They're not like those people. And who are those people? Those people are often from African Caribbean, and particularly Caribbean descent, right? And so the survey goes on to say that 50% of Caribbean people will say that they've experienced racism, racial assault, and only 40% of African people will say the same. Whereas 60% of gypsies and travelers will say that they have received physical assault, experienced racial assault, and 55% of Jewish people. So clearly, the groups that are most affected by racism are gypsies. This is the article's conclusion: gypsies, travelers, Irish, and Jewish people. Those are the ones who have received the most assault in the country. And they're the ones that we need to concentrate our efforts on then. It's not an Olympics of pain. There is no competition to be the worst minority treated experience. The article infuriated me because it does the classic thing of pitting people who are in exactly the same situation in terms of we are experiencing racial assault. So you're talking about people who have experienced violence in some way against their body. And we're supposed to then say, well, this category of people don't count. We need to concentrate our efforts here. And when we concentrate our efforts here, they happen to all look like us. They happen to all be people that, although we don't like them, at least they're within the normatives and bounds that we would appreciate and approve of. And so you can see that there's really this bias, even though the article is being written from a perspective of saying, well, we don't want to go with a basic understanding of racism. It also comes across as really arrogant and dismissive of anyone else's racism. And so I found it really jarring to read. Oh, sorry. It says that 30% for Black African people, not 40%. I said 40%. And so the idea that we're in some kind of competition at the bottom to somehow, if you have more incidences of racial assault by the population, and I have more incidences of racial assault by the police, somehow your situation is worse than my situation, or my situation is worse than your situation. Like, what is that? What is that drives us to believe that we should be pitted against one another in the first place? That drives us to believe, and this is a tool of racism, right? We see it in South Africa. You see it in places like the Netherlands. You see it in places like the States. We're literally pitting groups against each other, strating them according to the tonal quality of their skin and the amount of melanin that you can visually see, paper bag tests, etc., which we've spoken about. And therefore, the ones that are experiencing the type of pain that we agree with, those are the ones that we're going to listen to. Like, what? Well, how did we get here? How did we get to this place where this is the norm? Well, because what the underlying problem is consistently doing is, what was the system that drove us to a place where racism, based on the color of people's skin, based on the origin of where they come from and originate in terms of Africa, etc., is a system, is based on power, money, and capitalism. And when we have that combination, they don't care how they take you out. They don't care about all of that. They're trying to do their job, which is keep you distracted by fighting with one another so that they can still have all of the profit and the money. Now, I'm sure Mr. Storm wants to disagree with me quite passionately and has loads to say. So I'll just let him come in here before I go on to the story that links to this, which has, released today.
Yeah. I swear you pronounced the author's name wrong. So I'm just going to say Kanye can miss me with all of that mess. It's an interesting perspective in that he talks about the assaults made against Jewish people and gypsies. And it's interesting that you use that as the criteria for measuring your racism or how racist is country is, because what you've done is you said, I'm actually going to exclude or ignore the argument of power, right? Because what you're doing now is you're ignoring the systemic issues. You're ignoring the fact and you're not including as incidents of racism interactions with the police. For example, you're not looking at how the state brings its power to bear on these communities. And it sounds like the article, and it reads like the article may as well have been written by Kemi Badenoch. I don't know if this is a pseudonym. Sorry, a nom de plume for Kemi Badenoch, but it certainly sounds like some of the garbage and tripe that will leave her mouth, right? Jewish people are discriminated against. The traveling community is discriminated against.
And we did a whole show on that at one point because it is disgusting what happens to the traveler community from that. It's not good. We did a show way back when in one like our first year, or I did a show. Maybe you weren't here at that time. Did you freeze? Did I freeze? Is my internet gone? It's quite funny. I can move my ears. Folks, can you hear us? Can you hear him or me? Write in the comment section if you can hear me or him. Because I've lost him. I don't know what we're doing. Hey,
Now,
you're back.
Listen, I think the powers that be are after me. Yes.
They just froze you up. They were like, whatever he was going to say next is incriminating. So let's just
listen. Let me start some QAnon conspiracy. Yeah. But
it's not a competition, right?
No, it's not a competition.
And that's the infuriating thing. It's like, because and here is a very subtle thing. When Jewish people talk generally about the racism they experience, they call it anti-Semitism. They don't call it racism. They have a whole separate name for it, which is a whole discussion in itself as to why that is and why that specific name and why we have to have that. And it really links nicely to the next story, because this was part of the discussion that I think very poorly was being done. And, whether we agree with what happens next, but this was part of the discussion that was being brought forward. When we are talking about white presenting people who experience prejudice, pain, etc., violence, racial abuse, ethnic abuse based on their ethnic identity, so being Roma, so being Jewish, being Polish, experience violence, it is often not counted in the same breath as by themselves as that is experienced by people of color. They often call it by something slightly different. And that abuse is counted different statistically in the UK, right? So when you want to talk about, and in the USA, so in most countries where you have laws in which you want to talk about racial abuse, right? And they come into being as a law which says that it is illegal to racially abuse someone. When it comes to people who are white presenting, whatever that ethnicity is, but are white presenting, who have faced racially charged abuse, the crimes that the person who is doing is often not being charged with a racially abuse. It's attempted murder, it's grievous bodily harm, da 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 da. You can very rarely get a conviction for racial, that's a different conversation. But these are all nuances that are really important. And the person in this article does try to have that. But I think it's the dismissive attitude with which you're almost dealing with the whole picture and saying, well, because Black people don't report as much, then really the people that are experiencing racial abuse the most is this group. Is that true? Is that though? When you look at the way that you're even counting it, is that's what we're talking about? If you want to have a truly nuanced conversation about race, you're going to have to bite the bullet and have a truly nuanced conversation about race. Like, you can't have both things, and it is not a competition. You and I are not in trauma Olympics. Whose trauma is worse than the other person's trauma? Like, what are we talking about right now? That it is the most illogical problem that nobody should be going through these things. Nobody. We're in it together. But again, there's some problems. Anyway, I overspoke on top of you, Mr. Storm. I'm gonna.
No, it's all right. Look, I don't have time for it. As I said, he uses the statistic of assault, and I'm sorry, but so what happens to when people are walking down the street and get called nigger? Oh, that's not a criteria for regarding whether they were racially abused or not. Yeah. All of these things.
What about the landlord that is currently fighting to keep all their gollywogs on display this was this week? I mean, it's just a doll, said landlord in the north of the country. But it's not just a doll,
It
though, is
wasn't
it?
in the north of the
Was
country.
it in north? I can't remember.
No, it's in Essex. I swear
Oh.
it's in Grays. But then Grays is a notorious area anyway. So I mean,
Anyway, I don't know which area, so let me not cast no aspersions on your country. Let me just say that this week, if you're interested, there was an article because the gollywog conversation is back on the table again because people just can't seem to get it. Or every so often we get an uptake of someone who's decided to bring out their entire collection and just call it dolls and make it out as if somebody's being sensitive because they're using gollywogs.
well, here's a funny thing. See, people are defending the gollywogs, saying, well, why do they have them up? Or sorry, why can't they have them up? It's just a doll. Well, my argument would be, well, if it's just a doll, why not take it down? Right? People that are defending the use of this doll that would say, in regards to Black people being disproportionately stopped and searched, well, if you've got nothing to hide, why not take it down? Why not just consent to the search? Well, if you're not trying to be offensive, why not just take it down?
I mean, yeah, it does beg a belief that we are constantly having, I think, in some ways, the same conversation over and over again. And no matter which global majority, which global minority country you're living in, so you're living in a European one or a USA one or Australia, you're having very similar conversations about the fact that it is not you who gets to determine the harm that you are doing to me because I didn't intend it, because blah 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 blah. It beggars belief that we're still having that discussion. The thing is offensive. It's not serving any purpose to your life. It's just a doll. We just like to have it around. Well, then have it in your private business. You don't need to have it out here. If all that it is a harmless little something, 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 but you know what you're doing. You're being deliberately offensive and you're trying to justify it under the guise of you are a good person and good people don't have bad things. Like, really? Please. Just like it is not trauma Olympics. That is not what we're dealing with when we're talking about people's pain. I am not in a competition with you about who is hurt the most by racism, prejudice, power, capitalism, etc. It hurts, and it needs to be stopped. And the sooner we stop competing and start working together, the quicker it will end. It's that simple. To that end, we're back in the politics, and this time we've moved from all the things that the Conservative Party do to the things that the Labour Party. Off the back of this, it was said that Diane Abbott wanted to write a response to this article, which touched particularly difficult with her. And in trying to do that, she wrote something that was described as anti-Semitic and has been suspended. So the Labour has sought to head off a fresh round of anti-Semitism by suspending the whip from Diane Abbott, which means that she's effectively going to have to sit as independent and not part of the party. Okay, so that's just the term that's being used. It's not a term I really understand fully, but that's how they describe it. And so basically, what they're saying is she downplayed suggestions of racism against Jewish people. The problem I find with how this is being framed is who gets to frame what she actually said. So when you read what she actually said, whether you agree or disagree with her, whether she should have it retracted or not, the question needs to be asked, is that what she's actually saying? When people are using different terms for themselves to explain how they experience the world and the prejudice that they're going through. So she's simply saying what we experience as Black people, as racism, as we understand it in the social constructs in which we're born and deal with, you guys that experience prejudice, ethnic charged, assault, etc., are experiencing something based on that. You may call it anti-Semitism or something different according to your own community, Brexiteer nonsense, extreme right-wing, all these various names that we come up for the prejudice. But is it racism as we describe it in those terms? And I don't think she did a great job of writing the article. Whether she should be suspended or not is up to the party. But I think it keeps bringing back to the forefront this disagreement that it's a trauma Olympics. Because Jewish people went through World War II, their pain is present and ever recognized. Because Black people went through slavery, their pain is ignored because it was so long ago. Because the Polish people are going through this now, because the Irish people had this experience, because, hello, it's the same system abusing all those people. It's not a different system. It's not a different construct. It's the same system. And it's abusing all those different people in various ways. And we need to actually stop fighting each other and work out how to work together, because we're allowing very white presenting people to dictate our terms. We're allowing them to say what they believe is, and I don't mean white presenting as in white presenting minorities. I mean just white people. Say what I mean. White people are dictating all the rest of our suffering. They're dictating how we speak amongst ourselves. They're dictating what that conversation looks like and telling us how we should experience the racism that they are inflicted on us. Like, what? Like, make that make sense. Like, it's a structural issue. There are structural problems with the system. When we're so fixated on profit over people, this has always been a fundamental problem. And people have been described in this, we talked about the Windrush generation arriving and finding signs that literally said, no Irish, no Blacks, no dogs. Hello. We're not separate peoples in some kind of, competition to see whose trauma was worse. We have talked at length about the fact that people changed laws to include in the USA, Italians and Irish as white people. They were not counted as white people at first, to include them as counted as white people so they could win elections. You don't see that there's a problem with the system, and yet still we're fighting each other. So she's had the whip suspended. They're looking at what they're going to do. It has sparked an entire backlash. There's been a massive outcry, major problems. It continues to brood on. I'm sure this will go. What I find to be really terrible is this story is getting so much coverage and it's been pushed in a certain direction. The agenda is really clear. Labour has a problem with anti-Semitism. They are the problem. Labour is a problem. Let's get this straight. People can't eat. People are not being able to pay rent. They're experiencing the worst prejudice that they've experienced in decades under this current government. Incidences of police brutality continuing to go up, stop and search continuing to go up. All of these bad things are continuing to increase under this government, which is a conservative government. Yet the problem you want to focus your news report on is clearly Labour has an anti-Semitism problem, even though when you ask the Jewish parties within the Labour, they don't agree, because there is not a consensus on this issue, based on the fact that defining what anti-Semitism is still a complicated and difficult issue, despite it being a real, actual problem in their lives. Like, hello. But you want to tell us that you don't want to vote for them. Look at them, how awful they are, blah, 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 blah. That's what you're pushing. That's your agenda? Really? Despite action being taken just like that, this is going to be such a problem for them in the coming times. You're sensationalizing a problem that's being handled. Like, really? Grow up. When Boris Johnson was doing his mess for how long? When Suella Braverman got put back in after she was suspended. Are you kidding me? When she's talking her mess about ethnic... Mr. Storm, I'm going to drink my drink and listen to you take over, because, you know, I had a hard week last week, so I'm wearing Minnie Mouse ears. Go ahead, do your thing.
Right. So I think we need to increase our vocabulary and definitions. So, neo-labor. Right? Neo-labor, i.e. the Labour Party that we currently have, is a conservative party, or Tories, in sheep's clothing. The Conservative Party is National Front in National Front clothing.
And, well, he's Asian, remember
No,
that.
no. I'm going to call it what it is. Right? Let's be real here. It's not like they didn't have collaborators. Right? It's not like they didn't have snitches. Okay? And I think what you need to look at is actually the position that Labour takes is very much the old conservative position. That's how far to the right politics has swung in the UK. Right? And so Labour does have an anti-Semitism problem. Right? It does. No discussion or argument about that. But what's interesting is, right, nobody from the Labour Party has yet met Martin Ford. Now,
he's the dude that did the report.
Right.
Oh, now, come through now. Come on now.
Ford said, one of the things that Martin Ford said was that the Labour Party was enabling and ignoring a hierarchy of racism within its party.
Yeah. All that report's good. Right? Can we do that next year? Here
we are here talking about anti-Semitism. They're ignoring the reporting and the incidents of anti-Black racism within the party. Right? So hear me clear on this. It is not oppression Olympics. You should be dealing with the anti-Semitism, but you should also be dealing with the anti-Black racism. But the current leadership of the Labour Party is actively seeking not to do this. Right? So I find it very rich and very hypocritical that they want to point fingers and say, hey, you're racist, but then do nothing about other forms of racism, and to encourage and to perpetuate this concept of oppression Olympics. Because by targeting solely anti-Semitism and saying, well, we're making this the thing that we are going to hang our hat on to the detriment of all others, you're only perpetuating and making worse the system and the problem. So, yeah, look, I have no faith in Keir Starmer. I think he's very shady. That's my opinion. Right? I don't think he comes across as trustworthy. But is he better than the Tories? Oh, for sure. as I said, the Tories are National Front in National Front clothing.
Yeah,
But
well,
then in some cases, it's better that somebody's honest with you. At least you know where you stand. And at least I can say that about the Tories. You know where you stand. They're gonna trot
listen,
all over you.
they're out and out.
Right?
Like, they ain't playing. They're
Look,
out and out, mate.
look, I will never have to turn around to the Tories and say "et tu Brutus" because I just got stabbed in my back.
Nope.
At least they're gonna do it to my face, walk
Oh
up
yeah,
to me and do it in my chest.
100%.
Right? I don't have any such belief in the Labour Party as it currently stands.
Yeah, I mean, it is ironic that a woman who has endured decades of racial abuse, sexist abuse, misogynoir attacks is the one who is now on the firing line for this issue. It does, the irony and the sadness that I experience, and the lack of clarity, and like, it's just shocking, because when she has been through hell and back as an MP. These the amount of not only just abuse, but death threats that this woman has received over the years that she has been an MP is shocking. Did anyone do anything about any of that? Is it any wonder that she sees that there is a difference in how we handle and treat the different groups? Like, you had to see it. Like, I'm not just saying it's justified to say that they don't, and I don't think she actually says that they don't. She says it's different, because her literal physical experience of the amount of abuse that she experiences all the time is that nobody's ever holding a candle to that. No one is saying anything when she is compared to various animals, when people have put death threats on her. You know, it over the years, it's been marginalized, ignored. It's just shocking to find yourself in a position where you're trying to express, and maybe poorly, but this is going to be the push that the media has. See, there's anti-Semitism, and woof. And again, what she was talking about was actually a wider group of people who are white presenting, who experience prejudice at its worst extremes, right? She wasn't saying that they don't. And I think that's really important to say. And also, of course, people can't be trusted. What she says is she wrote a draft, the draft got sent in error, and then it's published as this is her thoughts. Everyone's written a draft, and we don't want our worst drafts to be the thing that defines us. But again, that's not the opportunity that she's being given at all. We're stamping it out, says Keir Starmer. There is no room for it. The end. You're out, you're out.
Listen.
But you can be racist in this party.
No, but that's just it.
Keir
Starmer's right. He is stamping it out. He's stamping out the black people. That's the policy of the Labour Party as it currently stands.
I'm just like, really?
As I said,
and
Martin
again, not
Ford,
justifying racial, like, I'm not justifying, and I wouldn't want anyone to be like, oh, but she really doesn't like Jewish. And no, I think it's disgusting how they're treated. You're not going to get me to say anything different. Like, the hate against Jewish people is so insidious, particularly as a Christian. Like, I can see how it seeps. It's horrid. It's yucky. It is just an awful. When you realize what's happening and how the system has constructed itself, you're like, ew, I'm a party to that system. No, I don't want anything to do with that.
yeah.
But this black woman has been to hell and back, and who stood for her? It weren't Keir Starmer. Just saying.
Yeah, as I said, look, I have no time for the current Labour Party in terms of leadership and ethics. There's 165 recommendations in Martin Ford's report, and the Labour Party are refusing to speak to him about a report that they themselves commissioned. Yeah.
It makes me really sad, because we see this time and time again with reports commissioned in the UK, particularly in the UK. Like, other countries just don't commission the report in the first place, so or they like bury the information. They're like, oh, you're coming voluntarily to make that report and give us? No, we don't want to know. But in the UK, where like they're great at commissioning all of these reports, but yet every single one of these reports, particularly in the last 10 years, what you've seen is the public like disassociating from the report, or rewriting the report to say things it didn't say, manipulating information to cut. And when you read the actual report, you're like, but that's not what it says. I mean, even down to what we talked about in Casey's report for the last few weeks, you see how the news cycle was on certain high points of the report. Like, these are keywords we're going to take out and we're just going to manipulate to mean what we mean. But when it comes to actually dealing with the content of a report, yeah. So, you know, reading these reports really is really important. And, you know, Martin Ford Casey, being a lawyer, having done like extensive work in this, it seems only fair that you should pay him some mind, understand what's being said, improve your party if you really are the party of the people, etc., 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 etc. But do what you will. So do you have a news story for us? Because, you know, I can...
Well, it's interesting because I guess we can stick on this subject. And it's more international, though.
Okay.
It's about the Israeli representative to New York, right? So the New York Consul General for Israel, they have appointed a self-proclaimed racist as their New York Consul General. Now, the person's name is May Golan, and she is on record as describing herself as a racist, and she has really said some horrible things about African migrants within Israel. Okay. She has called them Muslim infiltrators. She said they're criminals and rapists. She has said that many have AIDS and are spreading HIV throughout the country. And she wants them expelled from Israel. Now, I mean,
you don't get much more, right?
But the whole irony of this being done within Israel by Israeli politicians, I hope is not lost on people. You know, and to be honest, you know, look, they very much are taking a page out of what Martin Ford might describe Labor's playbook. And so, yeah, that's the current state of what's going on there. And she's also in favor of the Israeli government's attempts to circumvent the Supreme Court over there. And so, yeah, take that as you will.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the sad thing about that, what you've just shared with us, is that if I close my eyes and skip the word Israel, she could have been USA, could have been
British.
Australia, could have been British, could have been from any number of countries. Like, I really had to pay attention to which country. You know, you're talking about, and you know, in the current climate, particularly with, you know, the way that Italy's government have gone, for example, you know, it is just a disease across the globe in which it feels to me that poor white people are being manipulated into a war that has nothing to do with them and has everything to do with the rich staying rich. It's basically like that rhetoric is just so present. And how is that serving you get out of the fact that you don't have the money to pay the bills? How is that serving you get out of the fact that, you know, you're still experiencing the same hardships as everyone else in the poverty category? No, but it's given you a reason to continue to fight on, is to kill, harm, and beat other people, because this rhetoric that she's spouting ends and results in the death of others. That's the reality. We've seen it across the globe. We've seen it statistically in the UK, the Brexit rhetoric, the numbers of racially charged and motivated incidents skyrocketed. Seen it across the USA, Trump in, number of racially motivated incidents skyrockets. as you have that kind of rhetoric, the people on the ground do the thing that you wanted them to do, which is why you talk like that. And the manipulation continues.
Yeah, look, I think you're absolutely right in talking about the fact that she could have been from any country, but the fact of where she is from and the history of that makes this pretty.
Heinous.
Mm, heinous might be too polite and tame a word. You know, yeah, as I said, yeah, it's hard to put a acceptable word onto this that YouTube might not have you taken down for.
So we'll stick.
So yeah, okay. So anyway, that was that, and I thought, in terms of the stories that we were talking about, it was one that
It's really,
that fitted
yeah.
within that, connected to that. So yeah, any other stories you want to mention?
No, no, I'm good. I think
Okay.
I've taken enough airtime airing my frustrations.
Well, then I would like to mention three stories.
Okay.
Um, and that is that you have coming out of the US stories of violence. And we have a story where a man shoots a girl who is 6 years old, her parents, and a neighbor after a basketball rolls into his yard and they go to retrieve it. Okay.
I just can't.
So
It's too
children are playing,
heartbreaking.
ball rolls into your yard, so you decide to shoot them. Yep.
It's too heartbreaking. It's just, I can't. It's a kid retrieving a ball. What is wrong with you? Why do you have a gun? Your fears, your stupidity should not have a gun.
Okay. So now he is charged with attempted murder. Okay. So, as he should be, right? Um, Another story is regarding uh, a woman. She wants to perform a U turn, so she drives into someone's driveway and is starting to pull back out to turn the car around. And then she is shot. Okay. Now they arrested this person who shot her on charges of attempted murder. Okay.
As they should.
As they should. And the final one, in this case, the person's name was Kaylin Gillis, right? And the final one I want to mention is, I think we mentioned it last week actually, is Ralph Yarl. Now he is 16 years old, was asked by his parents to pick up his brother and sister, and he went to the wrong address by mistake. And he pressed the doorbell, and the homeowner shoots him. Right? Shoots him twice,
Can't.
including once in the head.
I can't. I just
Right?
can't.
And the person who did this has also been charged with first degree assault. Now, I'm just going to let you guess at what the victims of attempted murder, what demographics would you say they belong to?
Well, attempted murder probably belonged to white presenting communities.
And the victim of the alleged attempted assault who was shot twice, including once in the head.
He was a 16-year-old black boy. He was a child.
Now, you go ahead and tell me that justice is blind.
Ain't nobody going to tell anyone justice is blind. Did you actually hear the breakdown of why they went statistically with this particular charging of this crime in this state? Did you hear how they broke down the number of years that you get for the various crimes? Because people were like, well, why is this not a racially motivated crime? There was no reason to shoot this young black child on your doorstep. Like, you had no other reason, right? Why is this not being treated as a racially motivated crime? Because racially motivated crimes carry the lowest number of sentences, the lowest sentence possible for a crime, for that type of crime. So in the family of murder, attempted murder, attempted bodily assault, etc., 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 the lowest number of years you will ever get is months, and that's racially motivated. So they went through to what was it, and arguably they should have gone for attempted murder. Absolutely. Is it not racially motivated? Absolutely. All sorts of issues are at play in this particular story. But the injustice of telling people that, you know, your question is really comes to bear in the Ralph Yarl case, because actually, if they charged him with any kind of racial crime, he would serve a matter of months if he got convicted.
Yeah, but there's historical precedence for that. There's historical precedence for that, right? And you have to remember that there were states after the Civil War in the US that were passing laws that made it legal to kill black people. Right? You wouldn't go to jail.
I know one.
Go on.
I know one in this. So in the Ralph Yarl case, they're trying to use the defense of stand your ground. Did you know that the stand your ground laws only came into being in all 30 states that they're in recently?
Yes.
After a case where one white person got off of killing somebody on a stand your ground law, and I, for the life of me, can't remember the case. It was a really prominent case where he used stand your ground as the reason. Trayvon Martin. There you go. Found it in my head. Uses that. So there are 30 other states brought in that law.
Yeah.
And the incidences of stand your ground murder, like the incidences of the actual crimes increased so much that statistically is what they're looking at. The violence increased after the introduction of the law. What?
Listen, as I said, I think I said it last week that you just need to look at the amount or the percentage of black people that have been able to successfully use that as a defense, and it's negligible.
No, it wasn't meant for you. Well, I don't think there are any cases. It wasn't meant for you. It was literally brought in after the Trayvon Martin case in other states because it was successfully argued in that state, and therefore let's put it on our books as well. And the increase in violence is directly linked. That's what the study showed, that you can directly link it in the 30 states that have a stand your ground law to the stand your ground law. Like, the violence increases. And I was just like, so you say that about the legal aspects and the injustice, you know, is the justice just, right? Does it have that? And the reality is, when you're basing laws on the color of people's skin, trying to get certain colors off based on a legal, like, you can't make this stuff up. Like, if we were writing a comic book story, you couldn't fathom that this is what you were doing, but you literally could take it from real life and put it into your story and be successful, because that is exactly what is happening across the United States. I think the really sad thing is, of course, the little girl, the woman who was arrested. I mean, all three of those incidents are things that I have experienced in this last week alone, right? So I have turned up on the wrong door, I've reversed on someone's driveway, and the ball rolled into someone else's yard through, you know, just play, right? It just rolled into someone else's space, and we had to go retrieve it in someone else's space. All of those have been experienced by me and my family this week. Right. None of really decided to deserve to be dead over these things. Like, what are you talking about?
Right. And so they did an interview with grandson of the person who shot Ralph Yarl.
Denouncing his.
Now, here's a funny thing. That man, yeah, he's lucky his grandfather didn't shoot him too, because that man is definitely got some melanin in him.
Well, I mean, the man like literally denounces his own grandfather as, what it is. It's a racially motivated crime. This man
Yeah.
shot that boy because it was a black child, and he shot the child because of that.
Right.
And
But
again, okay, go on.
I was going to say, the thing that I wanted to highlight about what he was saying was that he no longer has a relationship with his grandfather, and that this changed a number of years ago. And it changed around the era of Trump, and that his grandfather started to watch a lot more of Fox News and believe the conspiracy theories that they were peddling.
Espousing.
Right? Here's the thing. To another news story. Fox News has recently had to pay Dominion vote counting machines, the company that manufactures voting machines, because they knowingly peddled lies that led to violence on the 6th of January, right? Lies that have led to violence around the country, right? And I think this is one of the things that, or shows you how far some people have gone down the rabbit hole, that they still, although Fox have paid out this money, they still won't believe that Fox is lying to them. Fox has basically said, yeah, we lied. Okay, we're going to have to pay you money and compensate you for our lies. But their viewers still won't accept that they're being lied to. And for me, I look at that and I think to myself, well, who has a responsibility to these people? Because they're clearly in some form of psychosis. They're clearly in
Yes.
or under some form of mind control or brainwashing, right? And if you were to do this in any other way or walk of life, in fact, let me give you an example. If there were to be a Muslim TV station or web channel that would treat its viewers in this way, you would find governmental authorities seeking to shut them down, left, right, and center. But because they peddle a white supremacist ideology, and because they are run by wealthy people, they are left free to do all of this harm.
So, let me just back you up on this one. There was a study done, news reports out on the April 9th. It's been downplayed, of course, because they're trying to bury it, but whatever. A new study suggests that Fox News viewers aren't just being manipulated and misinformed, but they are literally being made ignorant by their consumption habits. And so the problem with Fox News, the cable TV channel, isn't just what you think it is, because there has been a lot of talk about the fact that it's a purveyor of propaganda and misinformation. What it's actually doing is, of course, it's not a news station, right? Although it's called Fox News, it's not a news station because they don't report the actual news. They do Fox stories. One of the conclusions of this study is that when they actually looked at it, the effects of partisan media over viewers' beliefs, when it came to the experiment on the Fox viewers, they were found that they're actually more ignorant of the political processes. Like, they become less, I don't want to say intelligent, but what is the article? Let me read the quote to you so then you can get it. Okay. When Fox News, so what they did was they did an experience on Fox watchers where they made them watch CNN. And it says, according to the research, when the Fox viewers watched CNN, they heard all sorts of things that Fox wasn't telling them. They processed that information, they were able to take it in, and they became more knowledgeable about what was really going on. The problem was that they did not have that in their daily life. They had to be forced into it in a study. In daily life, they are becoming less knowledgeable, that was the word, and unable to process the information due to the manipulation tactics of Fox News and how that actually works. And so there is literally studies that are being done on what is happening when people watch Fox. And of course, there are a number of tactics they use. Fox is known for its aggression. It's known for its shouting. It's known for its opinions. It's known for just talking as if it's an authoritative source. When you actually fact check Fox News, problem is that they come back with very little facts. And again, this is one of the problems. So the biggest takeaway that they did from this whole piece of research they were looking at CNN and Fox viewers as pitted against each other. The biggest takeaway is that Fox viewers aren't just being manipulated and misinformed, which was the basic thinking beforehand. Like, if people watch Fox, they're being manipulated and misinformed. That's the basic understanding. They are literally being made ignorant by their consumption habits. Watching Fox, they hear a lot of news-like things, but they don't actually learn anything about what is happening. And so the person who did the report is actually talking about the fact that mainstream media can do some things that are useful, but in terms of Fox, it should be shut down as a news state. It's not a news station. You're not news, but of course in the USA, that's a different country altogether. But okay.
Yeah.
And by the way, they actually had to pay people to watch other channels. It was crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can understand that. You'd have to pay me to watch Fox News.
But like, it's really crazy to think that that is just normal. Like what you're talking about right now about the effects of course, putting guns in the hands of people who have been manipulated and who are shouted at constantly and watching the wrong thing. I mean, that's literally, Fox News is literally that, and everyone knows it. And it's as if no one can do anything about it. And you know, the thing I found infuriating about that story is that actually what I found it infuriating is, though I understood it, I still found it infuriating, is that Dominion settled. Fox admitted they were wrong, paid out their sum and walked away. I really wish that the judges were made to say that they were wrong. I really wish this went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and those same conservative judges who have preyed on the minds of actual people are made to say Fox News is liable. Fox News is wrong. Like, I wish that would happen, because you know, we get to hear the stories, or at least I get to hear the stories of colleagues throughout the USA who are dealing with people who have lost family members to the channel. You know, this young man talking about his grandfather is basically, you know, during the Trump era, he just doesn't have a relationship anymore, can't. Completely lost his own grandparent to this whole conspiracy theory, Fox era, Trump, cult behavior. He's not exaggerating. This is a common problem out in the States. And it's sad. It's just sad.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
Okay. Well, I've jumped up and down on my soapbox quite a bit today. So, anything else that you wanted to cover before we take a 2-week break for our season break?
Well, I mean, there's loads of things to cover. As I said, there's so much going on. We haven't touched on what's happening in Sudan.
Yep.
We haven't touched on what's going on with Canada, and they want to double the size of one of their ports over there, despite the fact that it's going to do untold damage to marine life and possibly cause several species to go into extinction. And that leads on nicely to another story that I was reading, in that, you know, whales are being killed in large numbers. We're talking about deaths of tens of thousands of whales due to ship strikes. So the ships are hitting the whales and they're dying in the tens of thousands, possibly, which is leading to a global decrease and threatening a number of species. And that actually this could be changed by diverting shipping lanes away from whale habitats. But of course, it costs a bit more money, so people don't want to do that. And that leads me onto the concept and the idea that, you know, I'm tired of Western nations telling other countries, you're the problem, you're the problem. When actually, no, Western nations have caused the problem and then come along afterwards and say to people who are trying to live within a society that they have constructed, Western nations have constructed, and say, you're the problem. And by this, I mean, you see it commonly played out. Well, we can stay on the whaling one, for example. And it was European nations that hunted whales almost to the point of extinction.
Mm-hmm.
And then they want to turn around to countries like Japan and say, hey, it's you guys that are doing this to the whales, the sharks, etc. No, actually, if you look at history, it was the European nations that did it, that made the numbers so low. And then once the numbers are so low and Western nations have taken what they wanted out of that resource, they turn around and say, hey, you need to stop doing this. We see this at play with fossil fuels, right? The biggest factor and contributor to global warming was Western nations. They burned coal to the heart's content, built up their factories and industry. And once they're ahead, they want to turn around to developing nations and say, hey, you can't use coal because you're destroying the environment. Well, wait there. Who caused the problem in the first place?
Yeah, we need to get on
You
top of the
used it
problem.
to your heart's content. And once you were ahead, and we are trying to play catch up in a system that you created, you want to tell us, actually, we can't use the same tools that you did. But
Mm-hmm.
guess what? You don't want to give us the current technology and ability and means that you currently have so that we can perhaps compete with you,
No, we don't want that. No,
right?
that would
You
be
don't want them to compete on old technology and old means, and you don't want them to compete on current means. In
Mm-hmm.
essence, you're saying, we just don't want you at the table.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which leads to a story that I was looking at, which is the First Nations people of Canada are in conflict with the Canadian government over oil spills. There's been a huge incident over there of a spillage of oil in one of their regions, and the First Nations are saying we lack trust in the Canadian government because of these incidents where you are not doing and holding these companies to account. So there are a lot of stories we haven't covered for sure this particular term, but we are going to head into a 2-week break. Put more Minnie Mouse ears on, at least for me. Mind you, you can wear these. You look cute.
Mm-hmm.
Watch his face. Let's see if I can get him in the Minnie Mouse ears over the vacation period. We're going to take a 2-week break. I want to say a massive thank you to TC Storm publicly for all the work he tirelessly does behind the scenes. He is supporting my dream of having a podcast, of the dream that we as the public came up with. You guys came up with this, the Darkside programming with us, and loved having TC Storm on, so added him as the main featured presenter on here. But he spends hours researching, reading, documentation, and so I want to just say a big, massive public thank you, particularly for this last period where you've had to read, huge amounts of work to keep up with a lot of these changes, reports, and things that other people are not reading and reporting on, but we do here on the dark side. So a massive thank you for all the efforts you put in, and you can have a well-deserved 2-week rest from doing that. So I think one of our viewers is agreeing with us. A massive, massive thank you for all the work that you do. And a big thank you to all of our viewers and supporters. We appreciate. Please do keep giving us feedback. It is really helpful to hear your encouragement, where the stories have taken you, how you're educated across the globe, and the things that you're learning from what we're presenting, or just jumping off to learn new things. We really appreciate your support. And if anyone knows a podcaster who wants to have a new challenge of having a fresh batch of podcasts to manage, then you just let us know, because we have at least 4 podcasts that we need to get done and just haven't been able to. But we will see you back here in 2 weeks' time. So we're having a 2-week break. So in 3 weeks' time, we'll see you back here on the dark side, where I clearly need a holiday, where we will be back for discovery and education and something else. I don't remember our strapline anymore. It's gone from my head. But you know what I mean. We love you. Thank you for joining us on the dark side. It's your turn.
Oh, yeah, ditto.
And thank you, Sharon. We appreciate the feedback. Love you. All right, you guys have a great evening. We'll see you next time on the dark side. Blessings. Peace out. And we'll see you soon. Bye. Oh no, not leave studio. End broadcast. Whoopsie daisy.